So why 501c3 status? What is the benefit of having that for your nonprofit? Let's get into this one. Hey everybody, this is Tiffany with Boss on the Budget. So I help people start nonprofits and raise money for their new nonprofits. So if that's you, you're thinking about starting a nonprofit or need help on your journey, make sure you are subscribed to this channel because I drop videos every week. And I'm going to talk about 501c3 status today because I think there's some confusion about it, and I like to clear things up for people so that they have all the information they need as they start their nonprofit. I did record a video a couple years ago on what is a 501c3 organization, so I'm linking that above so you can get some additional information as well. But in this video, I'm just going to explain a little bit about 501c3 versus nonprofits, how it's different. I'm going to share about different 501c's, but also give you 3 benefits to having 501c3 status. So let's talk about first the 501c3 status, what that means. It means that you are federally exempt from income tax. You're exempt from federal income tax. So you know how if you have a business, you make money, the IRS is going to come knocking on your door saying, hey, we want to tax that money. This is what you owe us. But if you are tax exempt, that means when you make money as a nonprofit, the IRS is not expecting you to pay tax on that. So when you get federal tax exempt status, 501c3 status is one of those tax exempt statuses to give you that privilege. Some people get confused because they think that it's a state designation. They think that if they fill out paperwork at the state level, then somehow they have 501c3 status, or, you know, I get my employer identification number, which is your EIN, and they think, okay, I'm a 501c3 organization, but you have to literally apply to get your 501c3 status. Now, there are some exceptions, like if you are a church, you're automatically designated as that if you are set up as a church. But to keep it simple, for most of you watching me today, you want to have a direct service nonprofit, then you need to make sure you actually apply to the IRS. Now, your next question is probably, well, how do I do that? I have videos on that as well. So one video I talked about how to apply for tax exempt status. I break it down and I'm linking it above. But essentially you have to use the forms that the IRS has made available to the public to apply for 501c3 status. It's either the 1023 form or the 1023-EZ form. Those forms are different. One is much longer. 1023 is the OG, so it requires a lot more information and it costs more when you're applying, and then the EZ version of that form is cheaper and you have to provide a lot less information, but you have to be eligible for that. So watch the video that I'll link above to get more information. One thing I want to stress about 501c3 status is that there are different types of tax exempt status. So you can be exempt from federal income tax and not be a 501c3. You can be a 501c4, you can be a 501c7, 501c9. There are like 29 designations, but there are specific definitions for each one of those designations. It just so happens that 501c3 is designated for organizations that have a charitable purpose or religious, scientific, educational purposes. And it's a very specific type of designation for people who want to do charitable work. And it gives you certain benefits so that people who give to you can write off their donations to your nonprofit. But I don't want you to be confused in thinking that 501c3 is the only tax exempt status. It's just most well suited for people who are doing charitable work in the community. Another thing you got to realize is that there are layers to 501c3 status. So even if you apply for 501c3 status, you still have to designate whether you are a public charity or a private foundation. And there are differences between those two organizations and the rules that are required for them and how they act. So you got to understand when you're applying for that, where do you fall? For most of you watching me today, if you're doing direct service, you are a public charity, but you got to understand, what does that mean to be a public charity? What are the implications for how I make my money and how I report to the IRS? So I recorded a nonprofit startup masterclass that breaks all of this down so you can understand it for yourself. So if you need help and need like step-by-step explanations of why this matters and how you need to think about your nonprofit when you're starting, go ahead and check out the link to the masterclass below. And even when you decide that you're going to be a public charity under your 501c3 status, there are other designations within that as well, which determine what kind of public charity you are, which really depends on where your money comes from. What's the source of your money? So I just recommend y'all, before you go down this path and start thinking about having a nonprofit, do your research, understand the implications of the decisions you're making, and understand why you're making decisions. This is also why you don't want to make these decisions in isolation. Your first step should be to organize a group of people who will be your first board, have meetings, and make decisions together about how you want to proceed. And when you all are working together, you should be learning about 501c3 status, learning about what it takes to run a nonprofit, and making decisions together. Don't just rush to do the paperwork, right? And I know a lot of you get excited about doing that kind of stuff. Don't rush yourself. Take your time, do your research. There are a lot of good resources at the IRS website that you can review for yourself. And there are resources on this channel and at my website that you can look at as well. So I want to share 3 specific benefits of having 501c3 status so you can understand why you even need it or why it's so important to have this designation. So the first thing is that in most circumstances, if you'd like to get a grant, and that's a grant from a foundation or a grant for a corporation, more than likely you're going to need 501c3 status. So I get this question a lot around startup funding. Where are the startup grants? And a lot of times people looking for startup grants need money to apply to get 501c3 status, but they don't realize, well, in order to get a grant, you got to have 501c3 status. So there's this frustration, well, how could I even get grants if I don't have the money to get started? So one thing you have to realize that 501c3 status is usually the key, is usually the ticket or the eligibility that you need to be able to even accept most nonprofit grants. And that has a lot to do with the granting organization and what they're able to write off for themselves and the rules around who they can give to. So you just need to make sure you understand the rules and you know what you're getting yourself into when it comes to starting this nonprofit. My recommendation is, if you need startup funding, is to tap into your board and tap into your family and friends and people who are connected to your mission to ask them to donate to provide that seed funding, because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to secure a grant unless you have 501c3 status. And that's one of the big benefits of having that status. A lot of people need to access capital. They need to access larger sums of money, and having that status unlocks that for them. Now, there are absolutely business grants out there that don't require 501c3 status, but in the world of grants overall, if you look at the spread of like how grants are given to businesses, most overwhelmingly are given to nonprofits. And so in order to be able to access those, you got to have your 501c3 status. The second big benefit of having 501c3 status is that your donors can write off their donations to you. So whatever they donate in terms of goods or in terms of money, they can write off on their taxes. Now, one thing you got to understand, let me just give a quick caveat, because I'm not an accountant and I'm not your accountant, but one thing you got to understand is you cannot advise your donors on how to deal with their taxes or what to put in their taxes. You just give them the information that they need to show proof that they gave to you. So you give your donation receipt and you go from there. If you need help creating a donation receipt, check out the video that I linked above talking about how to create a donation receipt. Y'all got a lot of videos. Y'all just didn't know. But a great benefit of having 501c3 status is that your donors can write off the gift that they give to you. And it can be a motivating factor or one of the motivating factors for them donating to you. I have found, though, that if a person wants to give, especially if it's not a huge amount, having 501c3 status doesn't matter as much, but for some donors, it absolutely does. And if you don't have that status, there may be concerns about whether or not they can or should give to you. So it's important to have that just for your donors to feel secure about giving to your organization and for them to feel like they're actually giving to a legitimate organization. But let me just be clear, you are legitimate once you incorporate. So there are steps to this, and the very first step to starting your nonprofit is incorporating in your state. Whether you have 501c3 status or not, you still are an organization that's a nonprofit because you incorporated. So when you then apply for 501c3 status, it just adds to your legitimacy, but you're still an actual organization before you apply for 501c3 status. And the point of this video is just to show why it's important for you to take that next step and make sure you get your tax exempt status. And then finally, the third benefit is credibility. There's a lot of confusion about what nonprofits are and whether a 501c3 organization is the same as a nonprofit. It's not necessarily. There are a lot of nonprofits who never get 501c3 status. They may get a different status because they're organized for different reasons. And like, for example, an association or a sorority or something like that, it may be a membership organization and they're not created for the public benefit. They're created for their own benefit. They're still a nonprofit, but they don't necessarily fit the rules or fit the designation of what a 501c3 is. So you just got to understand that there are differences there, but people don't understand those nuances though. So a lot of people don't know that they're different, right? Being a nonprofit and being a 501c3 organization is not automatically the same thing, but them seeing that you have status gives you credibility regardless. It's something that people know. It's a signal for people. They just know, oh, you a 501c3 organization, oh, you have a 501c3 number, oh, that means you're tax exempt. They may not understand all the rules around it or the implications of it, but they know when they see that there's more trust there. They know that they can give to you because you have that status. So it gives you a sense of credibility with people who just need some assurance that you're a good or legitimate organization to give to. So it's really important for you to take that step to get 501c3 status. And if you have incorporated as a nonprofit, you need to go ahead and get some kind of federal tax exempt status, because soon the IRS, once they see you start making money, they're going to have questions about who you are, right? What kind of organization you are. And if you haven't applied to be tax exempt, they're going to want to get their money. So the credibility that comes with it, the legitimacy that comes with 501c3 status can't be overlooked. So it's important that you take that extra step. I hope this helped to clear up 501c3 status for a lot of folks, because I know there's confusion around it. If you have more questions about it, you can always drop them in the comments. And if you just need help setting up your nonprofit, I have a free nonprofit startup checklist. And you can also visit me at www.bossonabudget.com for other resources for setting up your nonprofit. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.